Welcome back to the Chaos and Calm podcast. We're doing a series of professional podcasts for the MySENsability CIC company, just to highlight and indicate the current issues within the SEN system. And I am really pleased and honoured to be joined, who's given up her time gratefully, by our local MP Jo Platt for Wigan and Leigh, who has agreed to come in and talk to us today about, we're trying to do kind of different aspects of it, so we want to get your take on it, Jo. So I've got to try and be professional, because normally I ad lib and sometimes it goes completely wrong. What I've thought I would do is write a few questions down and see where we go from there. Is that okay?
Perfect.
So maybe introduce yourself. I've just introduced you, but introduce yourself.
I'm Jo Platt, and I am the newly, I don't know how long I can use that for, because I was elected in July 2024, newly elected Member of Parliament for Leigh and Atherton. I have been an MP before, so I was an MP between the years of 2017 and 2019.
Yes.
Had my sabbatical, which was 4 years, and I got to manage a wonderful facility, which we're in doing this podcast now, at Spinners Mill. Look, you know, I've got a real passion. Gaynor, we met during my sabbatical years, just with regards to, you know, the importance of SEN, the failures, and basically what we need to do to put that right. So I am absolutely honoured that you've invited me here today to speak a little bit about that.
Fantastic. Well, let's get on with it then. Let's delve into the world of SEND. I'm sure everyone wants to hear. So the first thing that I wanted to ask was, what are the government currently doing to support SEN families in Wigan? That's a good opening question.
Yeah, I think a really important question, and one that we're all asking anybody that has an interest with regards to SEN. Look, you know, I don't want to play politics here either, but I think it's really important to note that the system had broke.
It's definitely broken, isn't it? There's no way around that. It's
absolutely
broken.
And so there is a lot to put right. Myself, and obviously there's a huge intake now of new MPs in Parliament, and I every debate that goes on with regards to SEN, it's oversubscribed because of the issues that everybody is seeing locally. So there has been that push on government and obviously the education department that we absolutely need to do something. What the government have so far committed is around £740 million worth of changes to invest into schools. Okay. So to make classrooms more inclusive. Yeah. Because I think if you were to speak to any parent who has a child with SEN who is in mainstream schools, that obviously it's a huge barrier for young people, children and young people to get on. So that is one of the first commitments that this government has made. It forms part of a wider £6.7 billion investment in education for the next financial year. Okay. So it's delivering its mission to break down barriers of opportunity for all children and young people, not obviously just for those with SEN. But I think, look, to think that that's going to magic everything away and everything be okay for anyone with SEN in the school setting is that's not going to happen, but it will help. Yeah. I think just the recognition that classrooms need to be more supportive of children.
So can I ask you, Jo? Yeah. There's a lot in the press, isn't there, about investment into schools, into mainstream to make them more inclusive, which from day one when I met you, I actually drew out a roadmap, ironically, 3 years ago, of what the system needed to do. What does that investment look like? Because what I would like to hear is that investment is going to be structured in a way that anybody working with SEN has proper training, not just down to the SENCO or certain key members of school. In my ideal world, I feel that anybody working with children, and especially from early years, because I feel that there's an element that's been missed in actually introducing it in early years. Now, I know that they don't necessarily focus on early years, but ultimately, because of this massive increase in SEN, some of it is being identified preschool. So I feel that everybody that works with children, whether it be childcare or nurseries, even before they hit school, should have full training in SEN.
Gaynor, you've hit the nail on the head. I or the government or whoever can spout as many figures as possible, but what does that look like?
Yeah.
And I think in reality, that's what we have to absolutely set out. And the point that you make about teachers, caregivers, whoever, obviously who's bringing that child into that sort of education stage of their lives, needs to be aware of, the signs, the support, and everything else. And we know that doesn't exist in a lot of places. My experience in dealing with the hundreds of casework that we get on this issue, that's not happening. So my challenge would be back to the government is how does that look? How do we get Gaynor's roadmap?
That I wrote about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, but it's so important, because we can talk headline about these changes, but how does that look in reality?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've got to push the government on. Is that money, is some of that money, and can some of that money be used for training? How does that look with regards to the sort of education, training and skills aspect of teacher training? So these are the important questions that we need to ask. And Gaynor, honestly, keep feeding them in, because that's my job.
One of the things that I've always raised and that I've actually advocated for within the Wigan borough is that new teachers doing their PGCEs should automatically have some good content SEN training. So when they go into these schools, and it's not just teachers, it's a lot of the SEND sector, transport, for example. There's a big issue in school transport, and a lot of it seems to be because they have a high turnover of PAs and staff. And the majority of that is because they haven't got the level of training that they should have to be able to do that job. And Jo, I've got a 13-year-old that's bigger than me now. He's got autism, he's got ADHD, he's got global development delay, he's got a lot of complex needs. And I wouldn't be able to see anybody that hasn't got the correct training put into a situation with him and be able to deal with it. It's not fair. Yeah. So because they haven't got that level of training, they're not staying, which is why there's an issue. So I think the whole overall needs to start with understanding, training and educating people that are going to be working with these children to identify it, to support it, and to obviously put the strategies in place that they need.
Completely agree. And there was a debate that I did attend, which was on school transport and specifically for SEN, just with regards to the high turnover of staff, because basically, they find that they're not equipped or trained to deal with some of the issues that they find, and the pressure that's put on people that obviously go into these jobs. We need to be creating that environment, don't we? So completely agree, Gaynor, of how that looks in real terms.
I've spoken to school transport on many occasions because, as you know, I do my MAD, MySENsability inclusion training, and offered to actually engage them with that and make it very specific to their service that they provide. I mean, moving forward, it might be something that they decide to take up, but for me, it's a no-brainer in a lot of different aspects. I mean, I've just gone on, haven't I? Waffled on as I usually do. So how do the funding cuts affect local SEN services? And one of the things I'm really, really proud to say, and I have looked into it a little bit, is I know there was the safety valve agreement, and Wigan chose not to go into that safety valve agreement. For those that aren't familiar with what the safety valve agreement is, it's for councils that have a deficit, isn't it? Yeah. And they were given the option to try and reduce the spending. And if they could do that, and a lot of the spending reductions were in the SEND area, which there is, there's a lot of bone of contention around the reduction of granting EHCPs, they would then get a financial subsidy to offset their deficit. But Wigan Council chose not to do that. So for me, I think that's really positive that they didn't feel that that was a route that they wanted to take, even though a lot of other councils have. And then you've got the delivering better value as well, haven't you? So with that in mind, how do you think the cuts have affected the SEND?
Can I give a little bit of my personal side of this as well, Gaynor? Because I think probably what people don't know is that, I come from a neurodiverse family as well. So I've seen, the barriers that young people go through, including, my own personal experience with regards to that. But when I was last in Parliament as well, I chaired the APPG for ADHD. We work really closely. For those that don't know, APPG is an all-party parliamentary group. So it's people from all of the political parties that get together basically to champion specific causes and to make sure that
I think I actually saw that. I saw that video of you.
And we work with the autism APPG, because there's similar barriers and everything else. And as an MP at that particular time between 2017 and 2019, yes, we got casework through. Mm-hmm. During my sabbatical years, I call it my sabbatical years, during the 4 years of me not being elected, I was still getting contacted by parents. And there was a point where I thought, this is one a week I'm getting. I mean, I wasn't in an elected position. I had to obviously signpost them accordingly, but I just thought something's wrong, and hence them meeting me. And, obviously speaking to colleagues who were having similar experiences around the country, speaking to the elected MPs that I still had that relationship with, they too were saying exactly the same. Yeah. So I think cuts to schools, to staff, all these things that have basically, I think it's just snowballed. So, if you think of austerity cuts that were enacted in 2011, it's probably took that time to erode, the specific support that was. I'm not saying it was great, it wasn't at all, it absolutely needed work, but it eroded that away. And then come to, the 2020s, and especially after COVID, I think there was just an explosion, and then schools were literally saying, look, we can't cope here. So there's two sides, isn't there? There's parents that are absolutely struggling, and then there's the schools that are going, whoa,
and that's the thing, isn't it? A part of my advocacy, I always say, I can see it from a parent's perspective, but I can also see it from a school's perspective, working in education, in specialist and in mainstream. And I was very fortunate at the school that I worked in that they had me who had been trained in specialists and understood and was able to, handle more than one child on a one-to-one. I think I had 4 at one point. But I'm a bit of an entity, and I can see the issues around school. At the end of the day, you're asking a class teacher to deliver to 30 students maybe. Some of them have behavioural, some of them have special educational needs, mental health, and you're asking them to deliver one lesson at maybe 3 or 4 different levels. It's just not sustainable. So, ultimately the goal is to get that child out of the class with somebody that can give them that tailored one-to-one support. But that comes with finances, hence the big issues that schools have. So it's kind of finding that balance, isn't it, around supporting the child, but also supporting the school, because it is a tough job. It's a tough job supporting children with SEN. And I can say that from a parent perspective and from working in education. So I don't think it's a one fix thing for everybody. And parents, I get it, they only see the bit that their child is not being supported, but schools, I get it, they haven't got the funds to be able to do what they would love to be able to do. The next question I've got for you, so what policies are in place to ensure children receive adequate SEND support?
I think the one thing that I'm most excited about, and again, my experience with ADHD and autism, is the curriculum review.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think that's going to be a bit of a game changer. You just said, didn't you? You've got a teacher in a class of 30. Basically, they've got this end of year that they've got to reach to, where them children have all got to pass a certain exam or a certain mark or a certain level, so they're just constantly being assessed. There's no room for development, there's no room for manoeuvre within that particular lesson. So the curriculum review is being reviewed for that reason.
Yes.
There isn't a one size fits all.
Yes.
You know, that we're all academic, only, you know, if we read more, you know, we'll pass an exam. That's not true.
Do you not think the emphasis, Jo, has been put so much on targets, curriculum, achievements?
Absolutely.
You know, at the end of the day, if you have a child that has mental health issues and struggles to focus because of an additional need, be it autism or ADHD, you know, and it doesn't matter about the attainment. Absolutely. For me, you know, the parents that I work with, I always say your child's mental health and well-being is far more important, because that is the thing that is going to take them through life. And if they can't focus, you know, I've worked with some really, really heartbreaking cases where children aren't getting the support that they need. It's all about attainment, get them in. And that child cannot function in that environment. But it's about get them in, and it's actually causing more harm than good.
Oh, Gaynor, honestly, I could not agree with you more. It's, again, you know, my personal experience, having my own children go through this, you know, where, you know, one of them, you know, in education's eyes could be academic, but, you know, the other who's very creative, but there's no room for that. And that is exactly what we absolutely need to change, you know. And you know, as a side to the education side, you know, one of this government's biggest missions is to basically make the creative opportunities accessible to all. And what you normally do find as well, obviously, with some neurodiverse people, they are more creative. That's the side of the brain that does work really well. And it's about how we nurture that within the education, state education that we've got. Look, you know, if you look at private schools where they're able to have that flexibility, you know, that is basically what they do nurture. It's probably why you see the creative industries full of privately educated,
neurodiverse individuals.
Absolutely.
And it's things like, you know, my son he can't sit still for 5 seconds, but he could reel off something that he, you know, every single mathematical number, and he could read a book to you without actually seeing the words word for word, you know, but he couldn't sit still for 5 seconds. One of the points that parents keep bringing to me, and it's something that I think about all the time as well, is what is going to happen when he leaves school post 16 going into adulthood. And it's frustrating because these young individuals, you know, have so much to give from a creative perspective. In you know, I think it was IBM, when I read an article that IBM actively go out and seek these individuals to employ them because of their attention to detail, the skills that they have that others, you know, neurotypical people do not have. And I just wish that these could be honed in on in school.
I'm collecting these organisations. So I had a meeting with Aviva last week, and again, they sponsor Factory International, a huge cultural facility in the centre of Manchester. You know, they're a financial institution, but what they do for inclusivity with regards to employment is, you know, gold standard. And what we need to be doing is learning from organisations like IBM. You know, and other organisations, GCHQ, it's one that I visited a few years back. They don't look for a CV with letters after your name. You do an online test, and if you pass that online test, you've got a guaranteed interview. You know, these are the way that we need to be looking at how we employ people who fit the job. Not just because they've sat a particular exam and they've been good at that.
And at the end of the day, you know, the boys that I work with, they didn't take the exam, but for me, they achieved over and above because they were able to integrate with their peers. You know, and ultimately, we know that you can have a child that works all year and they completely fail in the exam because of nerves and other factors. So for me, yes, I agree, they should have an education, But ultimately, with neurodiverse people, should we not be tapping in their strengths rather than just get them in because it's about, it's about figures, it's about attendance, it's about just having them in rather than just supporting their differences. So for me, that's one of the ways I suppose we could support SEN. So moving on. Why do we think parents are facing long waits for diagnosis? I know why. I'm not going to say why, to be politically correct. But why do you think the waiting for such long... I mean, it's gone now to maybe 2 or 3 years just for an assessment, a diagnosis, and actually getting an EHCP if you do get an EHCP.
I think there's a huge postcode lottery on how things are done.
Definitely.
And I think that comes down to the health service. I think that's where we need to start. So if I was to start from somewhere in asking those particular questions, I'd be going to the Department of Health and Social Care just to basically understand why we have such a postcode lottery on diagnosis, on support and resource.
Right.
So obviously, I know my own environment with the Wigan borough, with, the Integrated Care Board, the ICB, so I can ask them direct questions and I can do that challenge. Some areas, again, learning from colleagues, it's easier to basically, to push that and to get diagnosis. I'm not saying that Wigan ICB is particularly bad. There are worse areas throughout the country, but this is what we need to change.
Yeah.
I do think it's been about money and how money is resourced into these particular areas. So why you get a bit of a postcode lottery on support and resource. So we've got to tackle that. There is the review now of the health, the NHS, the 10-year plan that obviously needs to be submitted by government. And these are the things that we'll be looking within that. How are we going to have that streamlined support and provision across the country that helps those that have SEN in first getting a diagnosis. That's, I mean, I say this to a lot of parents, but just getting a diagnosis isn't going to magic.
Well, it's not, is it? I mean, what part of I remember you asked me to do a questionnaire, and one of the things I said is the diagnosis pathway needs to be streamlined. For my own reasons that I'm not going to go, but it needs to be more transparent and more streamlined. And I do feel that there's certain aspects of it where, in order to support parents, just simple things like putting them on parent training to understand their child's needs will undoubtedly help further down the line, because a lot of these parents, like myself, ended up being advised that my son had a need. I was not aware of anyone with autism at the time, and my son was diagnosed just after his 2nd birthday, which is really early. And there was no guidance, there was no pathway, there was nothing. So I think educating parents when they need it at that point in time is really key. But I think the whole assessment process, the way that it's done, needs to be unpicked and put back together to simplify it a little bit more. There's a lot of emphasis around schools, because it went from kind of schools to GPs and from GPs back to schools. But then you've got Senkos that are under pressure that are also teachers, so they don't have the time frames to be able, especially with the increase in SEN needs being identified, to actually send the correct paperwork in on time and various things. So I think it all needs unpicking and putting back together. And if they're not in school, who identifies it, which is when we go back to early years.
I'm going to put something else out there. I think everything that you said is exactly what probably needs to happen, and how we challenge that. But I'd also say that people like you and organisations like yours are so vitally important.
Thank you.
And you do this with without any funding.
No.
Without, if you think there's pots of money that go to ICBs, the value that you and your organisation has in supporting not just the children, obviously, that might need that advocacy, it's their parents. Because there, like you said before, there's no roadmap for this.
No.
You could get a diagnosis and you literally get A4 piece of paper, if you're lucky, maybe A5, you know, that basically says, you know, this is what autism is, or this is what ADHD is. Good luck.
There you go.
There you go.
Good luck to you.
I know.
Move on.
I know.
Literally move on. And that's one of the reasons I formed MySENsability. You know, it's took me a long time to get to that point, but that's how I felt. There you go. There's your diagnosis. And for me, it was kind of, well, what does this mean? What does this mean as a family? What does this mean in terms of his behaviour? What does this mean for his future? There wasn't anybody to answer me those questions. And I suppose in a simple term, not text heavy, you know, I'll be honest, not text heavy websites. I wanted just someone to sit there and go, well, this is potentially what could happen. This is what he could do. This is what his behaviour could look like. This is what it could mean for you as a family. There was nobody to answer those questions. So I do think it's really important that every element of it is unpicked, and it starts before school, as we've already said. So what do you think we can, well, we've most probably touched on a lot of it, which the next question was, what do you think can be done to improve access to SEN provision in Wigan? I mean, I know... More
of you.
More of me, yeah. More. If you could multiply, I always say, if you could multiply me by 10, I'd take over the world. But that's going to be a physical impossibility. But I do think, because I know that a lot of the key SEN school provisions, the specialist provisions, are very, very heavily oversubscribed. I was very fortunate to be one of the parents that attended the amazing Rowan Tree in Atherton, and I know they're due to move sites in the near future to Leigh, aren't they, and do what they do very, very well from a biggest, but I've no doubt that that's going to become oversubscribed. So it most probably takes us back to, well, you know, for me, I think someone needs to make the decision that all schools, because it's not going to go away, is it, Jo? We're not going to get less children with a need. Needs to make it statutory that all schools, not secondary or in addition to, all schools are fully SEN trained. That's teachers, everybody. That's the only way we can get around it, that it is just matter of fact, it comes second nature. You know, so then there's not the dependence on Senkos. You know, there's not the dependence on services, really, is there? Because if every school is fully trained and understands what they need to do, and every teacher or person working with children understands, then it reduces the pressure on everybody else.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, I mean, look, magic wand, money no option, you know, obviously we'd have the, you know, as many specialist schools as it would take. But also that, you know, how we fully equip, you know, we've got a lot of school buildings that are old as well, haven't we? They're not inclusive spaces. No. You know, and how we update that to make them that space where, you know, they include everybody and anyone with SEN. You know, that would be our obviously preferred option. I think what government are doing, they are recognising it. They are putting that money into you know, into these areas, obviously, you know, updating and classrooms and spaces. And then that curriculum change, that curriculum review, I think is crucial as well, because it takes the pressure off that child, the schools and the school, your staff, you know, because we know that's been a huge issue as well, staff retention, because of the pressures that they've had, you know, and get kids learning again to their abilities. You know, if in a fun, whatever way they learn, you know, and
that's it, isn't it? It's homing in on how they learn and just getting the best out of them in that field, in their strengths, rather than something that's most probably not going to be useful to them if they're not in the right place to learn. You know, and the mental health is impacted by just the trauma of getting them into an environment that isn't suitable for them. In an ideal world, my ideal world would be schools that have a bolt-on for SEN. So the children get the best of both worlds. They get to integrate with the peers, the neurotypical peers, but they also get that more tailored one-to-one support. That's my ideal world. Because I do feel there's a lot of children that can cope in mainstream if they've just got that bit more of tailoring.
When you replicate yourself into 10 then. And then,
and I take over the world.
Absolutely. And you can be the next Prime Minister or whatever you fancy. Yeah, absolutely.
It's an absolute
I
given.
think the other thing as well, if we're talking about how, if we fix everything tomorrow, is that transition, which you mentioned before, so when you're going from primary to secondary, to college to university, if you want to, or into training, apprenticeship or employment.
Yes.
That's key.
Yeah.
I mean, I did work children's services as a local authority councillor from 2012 to 2017. So I did a big chunk with regards to children's services in the Wigan borough. And what I used to work very closely with the adult social care cabinet officer, and we used to say, all these issues that we're banking up at children's, because we're not dealing with them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they become adults.
They become adults.
Yeah.
This is what I don't understand. I mean,
know.
I sit there every day and I go, let me in that Prime Minister's office for 1 week and I'd sort it. I really would. It's like you fix it at the bottom. You fix the foundations first, don't you? So you get it integrated. You get the training. You get everyone understanding what SEN is from preschool. There's no more, it's not school, preschool, before school. You put all the strategies in place to support that child and that family at that point in time. That rolls over into primary school. It's already been working before they've gone to school, and that carries on and just builds upon before they leave primary school into secondary school. And hey, guess what? You build upon it. It would reduce all the pressures and all the services, especially like one of the things now is kind of like social care work for post 16, if they want to live in supported living, that kind of stuff. But all these life skills can be introduced from a very early stage, especially when they're transitioning into high school. And one of the issues that seems to come a lot through my parent advocacy is that transition from primary into high school, especially if they've not got an EHCP. Yeah. Because, it's not just Wigan, but everybody's created their own little monster, because unfortunately parents now feel that the child will not get the support they need unless they have an EHCP. And if it was just statutory from the beginning, the need for EHCPs wouldn't be so high, if that makes sense. So if they were doing what they needed to do from primary into secondary and it was still consistent in secondary, the EHCPs wouldn't be needed. The support would just move up through secondary and then into adult care, whatever that might look like, respite or whatever. But because we haven't put it in at the bottom, it's not going to be there at the top.
And can I just mention as well, because I just think it's such an area which costs the country an awful lot of money, and it's probably more so, it's basically from the neurodiverse community, but there was a study where they screened young men predominantly, from 18 to 25.
We've had this conversation, haven't we?
Into the criminal justice system. And overwhelmingly, the majority of those screened were neurodiverse. Obviously, undiagnosed, not recognised, not supported at school, had just broken away from the education system because obviously people didn't get them. And so going back to what you're saying, that early support
is key.
And diagnosis at such an early stage, which you can do. Supporting parents to support it as well, because there's probably a lot of parents that you wouldn't know what
that's
to
it.
do.
That's why I said parent training. When you're doing the assessment, put them on parent training. Give them a better understanding of what they're dealing with so that they can support their child more effectively, and then they can relay that when they go to school, and it all rolls on. And I remember when I spoke to you about that case, because there was a young lad that they didn't understand what his needs were, did have ADHD, he couldn't integrate into the class, and because it's attainment, get him in, he did break away from the system, and it made me quite sad, because you could roadmap where he was going to end up, because he'd been told all his life that he didn't matter, everything that he did was wrong, when we know the fact is he just didn't have the correct support that he needed and understanding. So we almost create as a society our own problems, don't we? And, you know, if every council kind of unpicked it, went back to basics, I think, you know, we'd stand a chance of fixing a very broken system.
We would.
Yeah, definitely.
We would.
So how can parents and community members advocate for better SEND services? Me.
Contact Gaynor on, you know, look, going back to the important work that you do. And I think knowing, I'm going to cast my mind back. I know there are support services, and it's not to say that they don't do a good job locally. They do, and they're valued, and they do what they do. But the vast majority of parents that I speak to, they've come to their MP.
Yes.
Because they've just got nowhere else to go. You know, they're going through the sort of statutory settings, education, school, you know, the local authority, but things haven't got better.
Yeah.
So having things in the community, or that person and that voice, even if it's just a telephone call,
like my SEN drop-in.
Absolutely.
My SEN parent session drop-in.
It's vital. And Gaynor, you'll know every time we highlight some of the sessions that you're doing, say on the Facebook page, there's a new parent that pops up on there and says, I need this.
Yeah.
You know, what can I do? How can I contact? And that's just vital. So it's about getting them messages out. For me, what we need to do as politicians is we need to be better supporting people like you and your organisation to be there, not to be reliant on funding. You're an integral part of this community and the support that you offer. So I think we do need more of that.
Yes.
You know, again, where you're that link in with community and your statutory settings such as school, colleges or whatever. But we absolutely need to recognise that and maybe make that case, you know, in Westminster. Yeah. I mean, look, as well, there's devolution, there's a huge devolution bill that's going on, you know, so that not everything's controlled from Whitehall, how we push that into Greater Manchester. So maybe that's the case that we can start making in this, you know, we've got these support organisations. They shouldn't just be reliant on what pot of funding is available to be able to get that, you know, be around that table with your ICB boards and your main providers into supporting people with SEN, and you know, let's start shouting about that. And
you know, I only started as a parent, and then I decided to go into education because I wanted to understand my child's needs better, and it kind of snowballed from there. But you know, one of the things that I'd like to see more of is, you know, there's a SEN child, SEN family everywhere, and unfortunately, because there isn't the businesses or the services that are fully SEN trained, these families are becoming more and more increasingly isolated. And with that, you know, I read a study where the mental strain that SEN parents have, that they go through on a daily basis, is that of a soldier to PTSD, because they're constantly hypervigilant, and I can completely relate to that. But you've got families where they're under such stress, under such pressure, but they haven't got the confidence to go out, and they're becoming isolated with that child, because the moment they go out, that, you know, for whatever reason, the judgments, the facility or the service that they go into don't understand what that child's need is. And I do think there is an element in some businesses that there's a tick-box process to say it's a SEN session. And I've been to many of them, and they're not SEN sessions. So, you know, I think there needs to be a bit of work done there as well to make things more accessible for SEN parents. Yeah. You know, I know we do the active inclusive, but that's just one element of Wigan. You know, if a lot of businesses that work with families and children, or have families and children in their facility, made the choice to kind of say, well, yeah, we want to be more inclusive. How do we do that? You know, my service can tell you how you can do that. I've done it with Open Air Bounce, who sells out every single session that she puts on in the summer. You know, I think that would make a big difference to families. Yeah.
I think just absolutely that, you know, knowing what we need here in this community, and look, the amount of parents that I've probably put your way. I've got Gaynor will be perfect for this. But, you know, we know that comes with pressure on you and your organisation, Gaynor. And
I'm only one person.
You are. That's it. We need that photocopier to replicate you. And
I don't think my husband would agree with you on that matter. I don't think more than one gainer is more than enough than he needs. So what advice would you give to parents struggling to access support? I mean, obviously, the ones that are fortunate enough to come into contact with me, you know, I do help guide them through the pathway and obviously give them a bit of direction, a bit of empowerment and a bit of knowledge, because ultimately I can't hold the hand all the time. But every family I've worked with, I find that just giving them that understanding of what what should be happening, what they should be looking at, how they can support the child, works wonders. Very rarely I have to actually go and attend meetings, but I do if I feel that family need that and that's what they need to help them, give them a better understanding. But what do you think? Parents, I'm just one company.
I mean, I'd advocate for parents to do contact your elected representative.
Yeah.
You know, so if that's myself, contact as many people as you want. People like me need to know what's going on in the system.
Yes.
So if there's any help that we can give, we've got a great relationship, obviously, with Wigan Council. You know, so we're able to, to highlight some of the concerns that some of the parents might be facing. So we're able to do that link and have that conversation, and then get our heads together how we're going to help this child or young person in a particular setting. So that goes on constantly. So I would just, advise anybody that's going through any difficulties at all, please let me know. Mm-hmm. Even if it's something that you feel that you're able to navigate yourself, it's still good to know that you've come up with a barrier. Yeah. Any of that there's constant debates in Westminster with regards to SEN, and even if it's not a debate, we can write specific questions to ministers to say, look, what we're going to do about X, Y, or Z. And I do rely on you, Gaynor, as well to push that information through to me, because we'll only get change if we are highlighting what's actually wrong with the system, you know. So, and again, that comes from the ground up. It comes from the parents and the children and the young people that are experiencing these difficulties. It comes from people like you. And I think just to keep pushing and keep letting us know about the issues that you're facing in whatever setting that might be. Yeah,
and likewise, families that come to me, because I work well with Wigan Council, some of the education departments in Wigan Council who have been very supportive of what I try and do, I can always help them there. So I suppose it's don't sit in silence and think that, a lovely lady that called into one of my drop-in centres, hers was just more about confidence and actually knowing what was right or what she can and cannot ask within her school, within her child's school setting. So, she just came and found just that support and that understanding of what steps should be taken, gave her the confidence to go on and do what she needed to do rather than sit in silence and worry about it. So I think just reaching out to services like mine, I've got a great network of people around me. So if I don't know it, I don't prevail to know everything, but if I don't know it, I can find it out. And just get that understanding. I think that's the thing for parents. It's that not knowing. So, Jo, in closing, let me see. This is not very professional of me, is it? So some of the key points then. We know it's broken.
Yes.
Massively broken. The key points for me is more training.
Yeah.
More understanding from the bottom up. Integrate it literally early years. Childcare providers, nursery settings. Because, honestly, it's a no-brainer for me. If they know what they're dealing with, they will know that child for a couple of years. They can hand that child into primary school with strategies, support, strategies in place. They'll understand what that child needs. Into primary school can pick that up. It's a no-brainer.
It's also for the child though as well. They start learning what triggers and
exactly
things to avoid. You're putting that support not just for people to recognise it, but for that person.
And for the family as well. So giving the family education, training them, supportive environment. Not just here's your diagnosis. Bye. give them that wraparound support that they need. And obviously consistency is key for any neurodiverse individual. Consistency is key. So what worked in primary school, please follow it on in secondary school. But again, it comes down to funding and having that awareness of, the smaller spaces. The curriculum is going to be massive. I think that's going to be a deal breaker, because if schools stop focusing on attainment and start focusing on mental health and well-being, and focusing on what the child's strengths are and pulling them out of them, that will only sustain them through adulthood, when they leave school, and obviously into employment.
Employment as well, a biggie.
And post 16, definitely, because I know there's real big issues. Well, not issues, but there's not enough focus on the benefits that our wonderful neurodiverse individuals can bring to employers. And I suppose the last one for me is consistency. I think consistency is key. And I think I've spoke far too much now. You haven't, and I think that is a perfect list for me to take back down to Westminster. And it is, isn't it? These are the things, it's not just we have to fix the education system. There's things that go before that, and it's not just, it's that transition into adulthood as well. You don't stop being neurodiverse once you reach 18 and everything, magically. But from the ground upwards, if we fix all the things from the ground upwards, it'll take the pressure off all the services
and I
at the
do
top.
apologise, because I've probably said neurodiverse, because this matters to SEN as a whole as well. And, it's about getting the system right for everybody. And I think that's really, really important. But your roadmap, including them list of priorities.
4 or 5 years ago I wrote that.
I know, it still stands. I do think, where I've got that bit of hope is that government recognise it, that yes, it has broken. I think, again, not to be party political, but the problem, maybe with the last government was that it was a
sticking plaster.
They're saying, it needs tinkering, without acknowledging the absolutely huge problem that it had become. So I think once you acknowledge that, you're able to then think, right, how do we put this right? And I know there's an awful lot of work that has gone on.
Well, it started, hasn't it, because of the DBV, the Delivering Better Value, which is the analysis of where the biggest strains are on the system, and just looking at the bigger picture before they can start to unpick it. So I do think the work has started. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think just integrating and saying, right, come on, everybody, even just down to, right, anyone that's trained in PGCE wants to be a teacher, you have to have SEN training and good SEN training, to understand what you're going into.
So there's some easy fixes, and then there's going to be some which are going to take, some cultural changes, which obviously are a little bit harder to shift. But I think if you, parents, yourself, keep pushing people like me and anybody else that has any influence, keep doing it, because that's the only way that you'll be able to push for that change.
Fantastic. And parents, please do not sit there in silence and struggle. You can access MySENsability.uk online. I will always respond to you. You can go to your local MP if it's a situation that you don't understand. I have a lot of people that are working within the Wigan borough, and a lot of supportive people around me that I will always be able to find you a strategy or some way through. We do a lot of send access facilities, because one of the things that comes out with the parents that I speak to is that, as we've already discussed, is the mental health support and well-being, being able to access services. So MySENsability are working this year on delivering a lot more SEND inclusive activities, such as Boxing for Better, which I'm going to be working with, Astley and Tilsley Cycle Speedway, so an introduction to cycling. We already do the Pelican Centre fun swims once a month, and it's going to keep going until I've literally filled my calendar for a week.
She's just blooming amazing. And I am so in awe of this woman and what she does.
I've only just started, really. So yeah, please, for me, I think your mental health is first and foremost. And if just having that 10-minute chat with somebody that gets it can mean the world, and it can help so much. Well, Jo, I think we've covered everything. I don't.
We could probably sit here for another hour.
I could, actually. I could talk for Britain, but thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure to actually sit and hear it from your side, and just get it from and I feel that change will happen. I know it's going to take time, and for those parents that are struggling to get a diagnosis, but I feel if everybody they now recognise it, it's what we do moving forward, as a local government, as a council, and we will get there hopefully before Harrison leaves school.
I know. And all I'd like to say is thank you for everything that you do, and I do apologise obviously because I might pass parents that are struggling over to you, but honestly worry. We're so grateful, not just obviously from me, but the people that that have had the experience of your advice. They're very, very grateful, and and it's not a job for me, it's my passion. This is what I like to say feeds my soul, because I literally cut me and I bleed SEND. So thank you again, and thank you for tuning into the Chaos and Calm podcast with MySENsability. Signing out, and goodbye.